If you feel it, chase it.
I wasn't country.
How would you do it? You do it.
Oh, no, I'm not doing it.
Do it. You were just doing it before we started recording.
No.
If you feel it, chase it.
There we go. Okay, better.
All right, we're here to review Twisters. Obviously, we've talked about this movie in depth of how much we were both anticipating it. We saw it in IMAX. And I'll just say at the start of this review, this is a movie you have to see in theaters. If you have an IMAX around you, it's the way to see it, I think. And I got a DM, somebody asking me if you need to see it in 40X. I've heard some conflicting things about that.
Heard it feels like you're in a car accident.
I think if there's one movie that you had to watch in the 40X, I don't really recommend it because I don't really think that experience adds to me enjoying the movie anymore. I've never benefited from watching a movie in 3D, but they have the wind, they have the water, they have all the things that I feel.
It sounds miserable though.
It does.
I don't want to be like cold and wet during a movie.
But if you're into it, this would be the movie for that because you get to utilize all those things that they offer. But I just wouldn't recommend it because I've never had the best experience with it. While we were watching this movie, somebody like kicked the back of our seat and I was like, hey, we got the 40X.
I heard that it's really bad if you get motion sick easily, which I do.
I think it would be fine for maybe 10, 15 minutes, but for the entire almost 2 hour movie, I don't know that I could do it. And it's also a little bit expensive. So unless you are just die hard into wanting thrills and feeling like you're on a roller coaster, I think just seeing it in IMAX is enough if you have one. If not, I think just the biggest screen you can find because this movie utilizes every inch of the screen. And we're only going to talk briefly about what the movie is about because I feel like not knowing much about the plot is a lot better going into this movie.
I would agree.
So it's essentially Daisy Edgar Jones' character was a storm chaser. Something tragic happens in her life and she leaves storm chasing behind. She moves to New York City and just starts working at like a place where they still work in weather and predict things. But
I think she probably works at like the National Weather Service.
Yeah, I think
just a place.
I think that's what you. I think that's what you see on the
just
screen.
Working at a place where they do the weather.
They don't really say
National Weather Service.
They don't really say like, oh, this is their job. I think I did see it like on a laptop or something. Their logo, but she goes there, and then she gets sucked back into storm chasing.
Good pun.
I'm gonna keep using those throughout the review.
Great.
And then Glen Powell is like the charming but kind of a villain type guy who has a YouTube channel. He's like a hardcore tornado wrangler.
Yeah, not a storm chaser, a tornado.
So then
wrangler.
They kind of cross paths, start butting heads, and that's kind of where the story unfolds. Can they coexist? Can they
work together?
Yeah, can they work together? And they're essentially, unlike in the first one, instead of trying to throw all the sensors into it, they're kind of past that, and they're trying to find a way to just eliminate tornadoes.
Disrupt the tornado is what it's called.
Shut it down. I will say that as somebody who loved the original, obviously, I am glad that they didn't try to remake the original story. It is a standalone sequel. The only real references you get to the original is in the opening scene, you see Dorothy. They still have it around. And the only other nods to the original, I would say Daisy Edgar Jones, her wardrobe at times looks very much like Joe, with like the white tank top and the khakis. Kind of a small little probably ode to
Helen Hunt's character.
Helen Hunt. And then Bill Paxton's son does make a cameo. If you watch it, there's a scene with an angry hotel customer. And that's his son. Aside from that, there's no references to any past characters. And I guess since it takes place in Oklahoma, that's the other thing tying this one to the original. And I'm glad that they did that. The entire dynamics are different. There's not any moment that they try to replicate anything from the original or think, hey, remember that?
Yeah, there's no callbacks.
Yes, which I always find annoying because I want something to stand on its own. Being almost 30 years after the original, I think if we went into it and got a lot of the same, it wouldn't have worked. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. And not only did it have just some great just visuals, one of the best openings in a movie I've seen all year.
I was shocked by the opening. Like, I looked over at you and I was like, why isn't he expressing emotion? Turns out you were just also shocked and your heart was racing.
And I don't really have that happen to me in movies anymore. where I was just glued into that opening sequence.
My jaw dropped.
There were so many just like twists and turns in just that opening sequence. That
Okay,
I was
another
like,
twister.
There's another one. But I loved it. And I was kind of like going into it like, oh, is this going to be good? What's the tone going to be like? And it came to play in the opening sequence.
There were people that walked in like 10 minutes late, and I'm like, you just missed the best opening sequence. And then they tried to sit in like 4 different areas of the theater, and I was like, I was very confused by that. I was like, you missed a great opening.
They haven't been to the movie since 96, apparently. But I love the opening sequence, and then once the story starts to unfold and you see their dynamic work together, what I started to notice is this one didn't focus so much on the team's chemistry. I feel like it was Daisy Edgar Jones and Glen Powell and their chemistry,
which was
fantastic,
phenomenal.
But this one really just highlights their story, their romance, their will they, won't they, their entire working together relationship. And it didn't really have that same overall team dynamic, which I thought the first one was about, like the bonding of the team with the storm chasers.
I would kind of disagree.
Okay, why?
I would say there was still team dynamic, but it was more about like the other team, the one like Anthony Ramos's team that she kind of worked with. And it was about their dynamic and like what they were doing. So I still think there was team dynamic, but it was a different dynamic this time, not involving. There was still dynamic. Maybe it was secondary to the rest of the plot, but there was still good dynamic, team dynamic.
Yeah, I just feel like in the first one, like that is what the whole story is about, like them all bonding together,
yes,
all the different cast of characters, like Rabbit and Dusty.
But it's also about Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton not getting divorced and then him bringing along his new fiance.
Yeah, that's kind of the... Which, by the way, Melissa got robbed in the first one. Like, she did nothing wrong.
She did nothing wrong, but you were like meant to hate her because you want Joe.
I don't remember hating her. Well, maybe as a kid I did.
What is his name in the movie?
Bill.
It's Bill? Okay,
yeah.
I was like, okay, yeah, Joe and Bill. You want them to be together.
Because all she does is tag along for him to get the divorce papers signed.
And she ends up getting flipped around, almost dies. There's cows.
She's into it. And then that scene at the motel wherever she's like, hey, I'm leaving. I'm not coming back. Like
and he just lets her.
I feel bad for her.
Yeah. Listen, Hollywood loves to paint the woman as the villain.
I don't think she was. I mean, I think if anybody, it's kind of Bill. Like,
oh, it's 100% him.
Like, you're back with your new fiance
and your current wife, who you're still not divorced from, technically.
And then you fall back in love with her and then leave. Yeah, that's weird.
He's the bad guy in that one.
But we don't have that kind of plot in this one. I guess I'm glad, though, that they didn't have that same dynamic or try to replicate it because it made it feel a little bit fresh.
Yeah, it wasn't, like we said, it wasn't a remake.
The only other thing that I thought was a little bit weird, like I think the tornadoes themselves looked a lot better.
The like tech advancements and like the CGI and stuff. The tornadoes were cool.
And I think also because we saw it in IMAX, I felt like we were right there in it. Maybe it was also like the cinematography that had like a more emphasis like on going into it. I think all the shots were just really great. Even like when they used the drones and the GoPros, I was curious to see how that was going to mix together. But I think overall it looked good.
It was so realistic. There was one scene where I was squeezing your hand so hard because I was so anxious because the storms looked so real.
The storms did. There was some questionable CGI, I felt. Like with some of the windmills, it still looked almost like video game graphics.
Listen, I have nothing bad to say about this film. I already want to go see it again. I actually asked you if you wanted to go see it again today, and you said a little too soon.
These are my odd critiques. The other one I had was I feel like the dialogue wasn't as memorable because the first one is so quotable. There's so many moments that just live with me over the years. I don't really feel like there was that moment. And maybe if they were fishing for it, it would feel a little bit forced. There were a couple of funny moments I felt more so on the Glen Powell side, but I don't think there was those big memorable quotes that I was expecting. And one of the biggest reasons that I love Twister. Those are my odd critiques. What were some of your other favorite parts of it?
I love Daisy Edgar Jones. I thought she was so good in it. And it's like the first big, I feel like, action disaster blockbuster we've seen her in. And I think it's just the start for her. I thought it was great. I'm glad that it did well at the box office.
Yeah, it opened at $80.5 million in the United States. It cost about $200 million to make. Had the biggest weekend opening ever for a disaster film, which is awesome. Like you and
it's our favorite category.
We love disaster films, and people...
I don't want to be in one, but I love to watch it on film.
But I feel like in critically acclaimed, there usually are not. Even at the box office, sometimes they flop and they're like straight to cable or
I knew
streaming
this one
service.
wasn't going to flop. There was no flopping like in the forecast for this.
It also had the second biggest opening for a live action movie from this year. And right now, it is the third biggest opening weekend, only behind Inside Out and Dune Part 2. So I think overall it's going to do really well in the run at the theater. I think it came out at a good time, coming out after Minions and before Deadpool and Wolverine. But I think people are going to continue to see it. How'd you feel about Glen Powell?
Putting me on the spot here. I thought he was great in it. They gave the audience what they wanted.
They gave me what I wanted. Like, my ovaries were tingling by watching this. I almost felt like Glen Powell was too good looking in some of the scenes.
The white t-shirt in the rain.
And I had already seen that in the trailer, but even seeing it on the big screen in IMAX, I was like, man, now that is the scene. That is your trailer. That is your movie poster. I mean, he's already on the trajectory of being the next big movie star. He's like part Matthew McConaughey, part Tom Cruise. And I think this movie kind of solidified him. And he's on a great run right now, from Anyone But You, Hitman on Netflix, and now Twisters. I think he's going to be undeniable.
He also just, I feel like he seems really genuine. Like, his parents make a cameo in every movie. His parents are like always going to like press with him. He brings his dog. What did I ask you the other day? I was like, do you feel secure enough in our marriage to be fine with the fact that I'm drooling over Glen Powell? And you were like, yeah, whatever. I was like, great, thank you.
Whatever gets people back into the theater, that's all I care about. We need a movie star like him. So overall, what would you rate Twisters?
5 out of 5 tornadoes. 10 out of 10 tornadoes. I mean, I know that's the same, but just taking it to a higher scale. I mean, it was perfect. I truly am kind of mad that you don't want to go see it again today, but it's fine. We'll take that off air.
We'll watch it eventually again in theaters. I would give it a strong 4.5 out of 5 cowboy hats or even Texas hats that I'm wearing right now. And I think it's because the original for me is a 5 out of 5. It's never going to move out of that slot. This one came very close. I think it comes down to rewatchability. And I would rewatch this movie right now. I don't know if it's going to have that same effect that I'm going to rewatch it as many times as I have the original.
This is, I said it on the way home last night, this is my new Step Up. And I've told that story about where I watched Step Up every day for a month. I will be watching Twisters 2 every day when it comes out on streaming.
But here's how I feel different after watching the original and watching this one. I would rather have a sequel now to this one than I would rewatch it again 50 times. And I think they're going to do it.
You think there's going to be another one?
I think so. It's made really good money. I think depending on how it does for the rest of its run, I think it's kind of hard not to do a sequel at this point. With, if you have the success, if you still have the cast, them really being like their biggest movie right now for everybody, I feel like it's going to be hard to deny doing another one.
Take my money.
I'm all in for it. I think it was a great theater experience because full theater, big action.
That was like one of the, I feel like that was the first one this year that we've seen that's been like the full theater, sold out. It was quiet. There was no disruptions. Like, no one was talking. No one was on their phone. That's like the perfect movie atmosphere when everyone is so excited for something. I love that. What's the word I'm looking for?
Camaraderie?
Yes, thank you. I was like, community? No, starts with a C.
Kind of a community. But yes, if you haven't seen it yet, highly recommend it. If it wouldn't have been for the original, I'd have given it a perfect score, but just having that one in my heart, I just can't give it that.
I give them both a 5.
But it's phenomenal. A big win for disaster movies.
Make more like that. Make more disaster movies like that.
Justice for disaster movies.
Justice for disaster films. I am such a weather nerd too. Like, I feel like they talked a little bit more about like,
they did,
the tornado itself.
They also like debunked some tornado myths.
That was interesting to me because I love weather. Like, anytime there's a hurricane, you come home and I'm watching like the Weather Channel while I work. It just is an odd fascination to me that I love understanding weather. I like following the weather. I love following like when a thunderstorm's developing. And I kind of wish I was like Kate in this movie. She just like looks at the sky and she's like, tornado developing over there.
Yeah, that is the way that she also kind of emulated Bill Paxton a little bit. She knows just by like
that natural instinct.
Yeah, she has like that gift and they all want to follow her.
They did bring, I feel like, the tornadoes into scarier areas. I don't want to give any spoilers, but it wasn't just like tornadoes and like the wide open fields. Like there were some
more destruction.
Like, you don't really want a tornado to hit there. Yeah, there was a lot more destruction.
More casualties, which was also like, whoa, they're going for it.
I watched a behind the scenes clip of them filming one of them, and I was like, they used this like huge high powered fan to like emulate it, and that was kind of funny watching them all get blown around.
Well, there we go. There's a review.